Okay, well, welcome everyone. I think we're live streaming, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the first inaugural meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. And I'm going to say a few words after we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Stacy Riccio, who will be the clerk of the meeting throughout this process and is very organized and provides a lot of guidance, is going to do a roll call.
Okay.
Hi, this is Lalani, just checking to see if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Can you hear us? She's on mute or we're on mute? Okay. It's not my, that's Kevin. So
So we see her. She's muting her.
Can you hear us now, Lalani? Can you hear us now? Okay.
She has to unmute her.
Now you're muted. You have.
Yep.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you see us?
I can't see you. No, I cannot.
Well, who wants to look at us?
I was going to say I can turn off my camera too because that's.
Oh, there we are.
There we are.
Oh, there we go.
You know, during COVID, we got so used to the virtual world, and we haven't done it in a while.
In a while.
Okay.
Well,
ready
I
for roll
appreciate the,
call?
All right,
the
Stacey, take
accommodation.
it away.
All right. Roberta Garlock. So I'm just going to say everybody has a microphone in front of them. When you're speaking, make sure you have it on the green. Yeah, there you go. Present. There you go. Arthur Gilbert. Here. Bridget Hosky.
Here.
Stephen Idarola.
Here.
Stephen Johnstone.
Here.
Arthur Kelly.
Here.
Tony Mancini.
Here.
Leilani Perry.
Here.
And Gail Tagliatella.
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum and everyone's present.
Great. Thank you so much. So I was going to introduce everybody, but I think we just did that through the roll call. But we didn't introduce Steve Mennick because he wasn't in the roll call. He is our attorney that is engaged for our Charter Revision Commission. He has done charter revisions across this state. How many cities have you done? Yeah, so many very successful charter revisions. Probably currently in the middle of a few. So we really appreciate your time and your expertise and your experience in helping us through this process and all the work you've done to date. This is my first time, right, doing a charter revision. So we're all new to this. So it's not as if you're alone when this is new for you. So it's new to all of us. So thank you, Steve. And then also want to introduce Ronnie Quagliani, who is the liaison to the City Council. So your role is to kind of take information back, bring information forward, hang out with us, right? Okay, great. And then for those of you who don't know, Chris Vargo, he is the chairman of the City Council, and he is here with us. And Dawn is here. She is the councilwoman from the 6th District. So this is open to the public, so anybody could come, and our council members wanted to be here with you. So first of all, I want to thank you all because I know you all have very busy schedules, and this is quite a task that you have in front of you. It's a pretty intense schedule, but it's a very, very important one. So our city charter is our local constitution. It's our governing document that speaks to what our roles are, what our checks and balances are, what our authority is, what our authority is not, what our process is, what our departments are, and some of the policies that weave into that. The charter has not been updated in quite a while. 2009, I think, was the last update. The last attempt to revise the charter after 2009 failed. It failed by a vote because this will go to a ballot for the residents to vote on. This is one of the most democratic processes there is because this is our governing document, and the residents and the constituents of a city actually have the opportunity to rewrite the governing document. and you are all the leaders of that process. I think it was a very fair process. Names were submitted. The council, it was a little tricky because if you were a chair of a certain commission, you couldn't be on, or if you were, served in some sort of city capacity. So I think you were all wonderful choices, and you will lead the process and facilitate. But the public is really going to have a great opportunity to come forward. You will hear from Steve in a few minutes that your very first action is to bring the public forward, to have them engage and offer their ideas. This is a very not only transparent process, but we welcome everyone's ideas. It's very objective. You will have your own ideas. You will listen to others, and then you'll take it away from there. I just wanted to, after I call for nominations of the chair takes over the meeting. The chair will come here, and then the chair will call for a vice chair, and then Steve will do his presentation, and it's really just a guide. Steve will be available throughout this entire process, and so will Kevin Cassini, who's our city attorney, who's online. Sometimes they'll be here, sometimes they'll be virtual, but they'll be your guiding legal touch point throughout the process, both very experienced. But then I step out of it. So once I call for the chair and you elect the chair, you are your own group, and you do your own thing. So with that, make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope. Okay. So with that, I will call for nominations for chairman of the Charter Revision Commission. Yes.
I'd like to nominate Art Kelly as chairman of the Charter Revision.
Right. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? I wonder, do I have to ask 3 times? Is there any other nominations? I will, just in case. Any other nominations? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Mr. Kelly, lucky you. Take it away.
Lucky me is right.
First time I ever voted for a Red Sox fan.
Lucky us.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the nomination. I appreciate it and everyone's support. I look forward to chairing this commission and having everybody take part and contribute in it. The first thing I'd like to do is call for nominations of vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Leilani Perry.
We have a second.
I'd like to second it.
You have a second. Any other nominations? Any other nominations at this time? Any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 1. Any abstentions? Motion is moved. Congratulations, Leilani. Did she hear us?
Yeah.
You won.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call on Steve Medrick for his presentation.
Sure. And the microphone up there as well. Okay.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Congratulations, Madam Vice Chair. We have a real serious road ahead in the next few weeks. Madam Mayor, it's an honor to be in this chamber with you, a chamber I've worked in many, many times over the years. And I just want to point out that even though I just found out tonight he's not a Red Sox fan, my old friend Art Gilbert, it's so good to see Art. I've worked with him many, many years, and Chief Quagliani, Councilman Quagliani, Treasurer Quagliani, the jack of all trades, one of my favorite people in West Haven as well. Mr. Chair and Madam Councilwoman, it's wonderful to see both of you and an honor to be here. What I'm going to do to this evening, and I'll try not to take too much time, sometimes takes a half hour, 20 minutes. I want to walk through, so we can't do any business, so you might as well catch up on your sleep or listen to me and we'll figure out a little bit about home rule, which is important, and charter revision. They kind of go hand in hand. Without home rule, you don't have charter revision. A few years ago, I was asked by when the mayor was probably still in the legislature, I was asked by the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations to come up with a simple definition of home rule. I've argued for years and years, and I counted it after the mayor did. I've done 37 charters in about 20 communities, multiple times in some of the communities till we get it right. Home rule sounds easy. It's like self-evident what it means, but it's not really that clear. It means different things to different people. Some people think of it as local authority, local control, or even sovereignty, like the federal government is a sovereign, the state government is a sovereign. But that's not what home rule is. Municipalities are not sovereigns. It's a misnomer, rife with ambiguity and misunderstanding. When we tried to come up with the definition of home rule, we found that was not such an easy thing to do. And what we wanted to try to do is we wanted to try to build a concept for dealing with local government that works in the 21st century. Home rule started in the mid 19th century, 3 years after the Civil War, in a case from Iowa, which is called Dillon's Rule. Pat Dillon thinks it's named after her, but it precedes even Pat Dillon, state representative from New Haven for many, many years. And remember these terms, because this goes back to 1867, but it still applies today, that a municipal corporation, and you are a municipal corporation, can only exercise the powers explicitly granted to them, necessarily or fairly implied in or incident to the powers that are expressly granted, so some implied power from an express grant of authority, and they must be essential to the declared objects and purposes of the corporation, not simply convenient, but indispensable. Let me give you an example. When I was on the Board of Alders in New Haven, I wanted to do something about violence in New Haven. I wanted to do something about guns in New Haven. And I went to the Corporation Council at the time, a venerable old man, probably younger than I am today, named Charlie Album. And I said to him, I want to do something to regulate guns. And he said to me, young man, there's no express grant of authority. I had no idea what he was talking about, and I was a young lawyer at the time, to do that. What it meant was there's no law that allows a municipality to regulate guns. We tried to make an argument through development, through health, through any number of ways, and we could not find a way to do it. There's actually only one town, and I represent them, who actually has the power to regulate guns, the city of Norwalk, because in their charter, they have a provision that allows them to regulate firearms in the city. It's an express grant of authority, special act that was adopted sometime the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, that works. That was just an example of how express authority works for local government. We had a constitution that was adopted in 1818. There was really no mention of home rule. We had all these municipalities in the state of Connecticut, but there was no mention of local government in our state constitution. And up until 1957, all local governments operated through special acts. So you'd have to go to your state senator, your state representative, and have them go pass your charter. It was done by the state legislature. Presumably a mayor or first selectman would sit with the legislator and get their charter through the legislature. I don't know. I've not done the work, and maybe I'll talk to Councilor Cassini, who's really an outstanding young man. I'm very impressed with him, and the mayor's made a wonderful choice for her corporation council to see if we know if there are any elements of the special acts that still exist in your charter. I don't think so from my read of the charter. I don't see that. But that's one of the things I'm very careful about when we do surgery on charters. Use the Norwalk example. Unless they don't want to do something about guns, you don't get rid of a special act that gives you a unique power, whether it's for your fire districts or for gun control or for health districts or whatever it may be. Or in New Haven, it used to be the unelected Board of Education. They had a special act that allowed them to have a Board of Education that was not elected. We have 2 elected members in New Haven now. but they could still have the other members who aren't elected because there was a special act that allowed them to do that. And so after 1957, they passed the Home Rule Act, and the Home Rule Act supplanted the long history of adopting special acts. And in the 1960s, you started adopting home rule charters in the cities. And again, remember, you're not a government, you're a corporation. And if any of you are in business and know what a corporation is, you're a fiction, and you only have the powers that the state gives you. Again, those express grants of authority. There's no sovereign authority whatsoever. You have to really go with what the authority the legislature gives you to do that. And the purpose of the Home Rule Act was to, one, relieve the legislature, the General Assembly, of the burdensome task of handling and enacting special legislation. Could you imagine the legislature in the 21st century doing all the work they have to do, and on top of that, they have to worry about 169 communities' forms of governance? That's the way it used to be. That's the way it used to be, and since 1957, that's moved away. So in 1965, 8 years later, we adopted a constitution. It's the last constitutional convention in the state of Connecticut. It's the Connecticut Constitution of 1965, and Article 10th is a chapter that's called Of Home Rule. So for the first time in the history of the state, in 1965, local government is recognized in the Constitution. But again, it simply says you have those powers that are granted by the legislature. And so Title VII of the general statutes, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit as we go through the charter this year, they lay out all of the powers that you have. And it's a fairly exhaustive list. There's virtually nothing you can't do to manage and operate your government day to day. But you still need an affirmative express grant of authority in order to have the power to do anything locally. So as I said, it's a fiction, it's an artifice, or a construct for the orderly operation of local government. There's no inherent power or authority for local government. Silence is not authority. Let me give you an example of that. And you'll hear me say it many, many times, and I think I said it to the leadership the other day. We were having a chat about some of the priorities in town, and one of the things I predicted for your public hearing, which we'll talk about scheduling for next week, is there's almost, and I don't want to invite them, but it's almost somebody always comes to a public hearing and says we want to have term limits. And I always give my opinion, and sometimes in writing, other times just verbally, that there's no express grant of authority for term limits in the state of Connecticut. Title IX controls the elections process. There's nothing in Title IX, nothing in Title VII that gives a local government the authority to limit the term. The only thing you can do about terms is elect people to 2-year terms or 4-year terms. There's a little more diversity on that for other offices, but for the major offices that we're worried about, it's 2 years or 4 years, no limits. And I argued the case when I was a young lawyer in the 1980s, when Art knew me, and I actually had here, not the long part, but the top of the head here. I argued the case of Simons versus Canty, which ruled that recall of elected officials was illegal in the state of Connecticut, except for the 5 towns, again, that have express grants of authority under their special acts. New Haven has recall, I believe, for alders, not for, which I used to serve as. Thank God I was never recalled. Not the mayor. I think it's for the alders. And the other 4 communities are recall for all elected officials. But silence is not authority. And the reason I use the example of term limits is I always tell commissions you can't do term limits. It's always one of the first things I say because it's one of the first issues that comes up. And one year I did that. I think I was in Middletown doing a charter. And at the next meeting, somebody said, well, Mr. Mednick, we found a town that has term limits. And I said, well, nothing surprises me completely. And it turned out to be Wilton, Connecticut. And I also know I represent Stonington. They have term limits. We're going to deal with that this year, but they have term limits. So I called the town attorney in Wilton, and I said, you were town attorney when the charter passed? Yep, I was. And said, how did the term limits get by? He said, oh, I didn't realize we had term limits. Now, that town, unlike this town, I'll be talking to Kevin Cassini on a fairly regular basis to make sure that he's fully informed of what's going to be going on, and that I'm fully informed of what some of the customs are and some of the traditions are, et cetera. I'll be talking to the mayor, the chair of the council, and others, Ron Quagliani and others, to make sure that we're doing those things that we have to do. So I said, well, who chaired the commission? Turns out it was a lawyer from a bankruptcy lawyer, very well regarded bankruptcy lawyer from Hartford, lived in Wilton, was practicing in Hartford. I called him up and I said to him, so tell me, Bob, what happened there? How'd you end up with term limits? Oh, well, the law didn't say we can't do it. And that is precisely, that is wrong as can be when you analyze home rule. Silence is not authority. You need the express grant of authority. So I told Bob, I will not give you any opinions on bankruptcy if you don't give any opinions on home rule. It's an ineffectual position. Actually, Bristol has one too. The new mayor of Bristol will have great stories about a little battle that we fought a few years ago on that issue. But there are a few communities that have it because it's popular in some places, but it's not enforceable, in my view. There's no court case on it, but I don't think it's enforceable. So, if you read literature on cities, you hear cities we talk about cities as being creatures of the state, creations of the state. And it's basically reinforced by Judge Dillon. That's why it's called the rule in Dillon's case, when he opined, sounding as if he was paraphrasing a Mary Shelley 19th century Gothic novel, where he said that state legislatures breathe into them, municipalities, the breath of life without which they cannot exist, and it so creates, so it may destroy. It sounds like the Frankenstein monster, but it truly is the way Judge Dillon describes cities, and it really does sum it up. So the express grants of authority can deal with your functions of the government, how your government operates, the fiscal authority of the municipality. I'm not going to go into every detail in this thing. The fiscal authority, personnel, human resources authority, and it's it gives you a fair amount of authority, but there are limitations. You're limited to what the legislature says you can do. We can look at it a little further. If any questions come up, I can hand out the Municipal Powers Act that gives you a definitive list of all the powers. There is nothing in your charter today that you can't do. Your charter is clean in that regard. Everything is in this charter is something you can do, creating your departments, your boards and commissions, your budget process. Everything in here is permissible. So we don't have any of those kinds of issues in West Haven that we have to deal with. So it's a blueprint for the governance community. The mayor talked about it being a constitution. It really is the local constitution. And I feel very strongly about the importance of it. And nothing bothers me more. I just had this happen in another community about 2 weeks ago, where a town attorney said to me, it's just the charter. We don't have to follow that. And I said, you're a lawyer. You're the town's attorney. It is a law. A charter is a law. Your ordinances are a law. And there are, as Kevin Cassini knows, there is a case from the city of Norwalk that really is a wonderful case that I used when I was Corporation Counsel in New Haven, that says that if you're doing business with a community, this is really important. If you're doing business with a community, you're obligated to know the law of the community. And that's why I always tell people, make sure your charters are up to date. And the other thing you should do is you should make sure your ordinances are up to date. Because if your ordinances are not up to date, how do you put the responsibility on the vendor who's doing business with your city to rely on the governance of the city if the ordinance is out of compliance with the charter? So some of my charters now have provisions that after you do a charter revision, you should take a look at your ordinances to make sure the charter didn't do anything to upset or interrupt the flow of the process there. So there's two major requirements in a charter. The only two real requirements is you need to have a chief executive, you have a mayor, and you need to have a legislative body, and you have a council in this town. Those are the only two responsibilities, the absolute required positions. Everything else is really up to you to have the departments, the boards and commissions, and the procedures that you need to govern your community. That's the third requirement, which is a pretty big requirement, but it's not specific. I always like to say in the towns that have boards of finance, where boards of finance in some smaller towns, the mayor probably had colleagues from around the state who are from Board of Selectmen towns. And if you talk to first selectmen, her colleagues as first selectmen, as chief executives, and their boards of selectmen, they're often at the mercy of these elected boards of finance. And I always tell them, we're required, you're not. That doesn't help. They have very big egos on boards of finance, but the mayor is a required position and the council is a required position. Absolutely critical to have that balance of power. And so what your charter needs to focus on, what you need to focus on as we go through this process, is that your charter needs to be clear. There needs to be clarity in your charter. The public and public officials should all be able to understand and navigate the document. There should be flexibility, and we'll talk about that in this process as well. It should be written with broad prescriptions of a constitution. Constitutions don't create every department of the government. There are some. The State Department is in the Constitution. I think Commerce is in this Constitution. There's a few departments that are in the federal Constitution, but not all the departments. They're created by statute. And so the Constitution has provided general flexibility for the president, sometimes too much flexibility, for the president and for the Congress to manage the government in real time to meet the needs of the current times that they're operating in. And that's what I try to do with charters, and we'll talk about that in a few moments on this. So you want to have flexibility. You want to have enough guardrails to make sure you just don't go off and do horrendous things that are irreversible or difficult to deal with. So you want to have some protections within the charter and some mandates in the charter, but you don't need to create every department. That's one of the things you do have in this charter, and we'll talk about that later. And you want to have accountability. So the roles are clear so the public can hold elected officials accountable. You want to have a strong ethics standard. You want to have strong open government language, public meeting language. I throw definition sections into charters so the members of the public can take a look at something as simple as a public hearing or public notice. I try to recommend a definition of public notice has to be consistent, obviously, with FOIA, Freedom of Information, but that a member of the public can look at the notice and know what it means when they see public notice in the charter. It can't mean 12 different things. It'll mean one thing, basically, in terms of how you do it. You may have a different lead time, 3 days instead of 5 days or 5 days instead of 10 days, but the definition will be the same, and how you post your meetings will be governed by the charter, and that's really, really important. What I think you want to do also is you want to avoid what I call the culture of disregard or paralysis. You don't want to have a charter where the provisions are so ambiguous or non-existent where it puts everybody in a difficult position. It puts the mayor and the council in a difficult position when they're trying to do something and the charter either is not clear or the charter is silent, and you have to figure things out. So you want to make sure your charter covers all the areas that you need to have. So in your current charter, and we'll pass this out to all of you, I kind of redid the charter. We had to do an amendment of the charter for budget dates this year, which we're permitted to do without going to a charter revision commission. So I redid the charter in a good size, large font so we can all read it. And I annotated it so that we know where the sections come from, because as we move things around, we want to be able to track where we took things from to be able to tell the public what we've actually done. Your charter lays out, I've made no changes in it, 20 chapters. That's a lot of chapters for a charter. And that's largely because every office is named. Almost every department is named in the charter. And one of the things I recommend, and we'll look at this when we start the business of the Charter Commission, is to come up with a contents and that is slightly different. That, of course, the mayor's going to have a chapter, the council will have a chapter, all the other elected officials I recommend would go into their own chapter. Departments and department heads would have a chapter. And what you do there is you will have the steps, the authority to create departments so that the mayor and the council can create departments. They can consolidate departments. They can eliminate departments. How you appoint department heads. Then you'll name. Corp counsel is usually named as an individual department in the government. But then you want to set up your charter so that it basically is a functional approach. So you may name some of the departments, But in general, you may create categories that you need to have departments for government finance, economic and community development, human resources and personnel, operations, community services, or public safety. That's a breakdown from one of my other communities. The breakdown could be a little different in West Haven. Chapter 7 on boards and commissions. You again, general requirements for how you create them. So the charter will tell you anytime you create a board or commission, these are the steps you need to have. These are the things that need to be in the ordinance. So they all look the same. They all, in terms of the content of a board or commission. But the charter may establish some boards or commissions. You may believe that the police commission is an important enough commission to have laid out in the charter, spelled out in the charter, because it's important, critical for that purpose. If you had civil service, that's one of the commissions that I always say should be there. An ethics commission, you probably want to have in a charter, so you can't have problems with the ethics commission. All other boards and commissions, whether it's a park commission, may be an important one too. You may have boards and commissions that are required by the charter, but aren't spelled out, except you have to have them. A recreation commission, a human services commission, whatever it may be. We'll go down the list and figure out whether it makes sense to go in that direction. And again, you may also allow for the consolidation or merger of boards and commissions. What I've been finding throughout the state of Connecticut, and maybe West Haven doesn't have this problem, is that it's been difficult to get people to stay on commissions, to show up for commission meetings, to get quora for commission meetings. And so I've created provisions in some charters that allow for consolidation or merger. So that even if you have commissions that are named in the charter, if you find that you're having problems, you may want to merge them or consolidate them. The charter gives you the ability to do that by ordinance, and it remains that way. Education would retain its own section. There's a code of ethics section. That could be the same. Budget, then initiative. Then you'll have transition and miscellaneous provisions. And a 13th chapter, maybe my mother would never allow to have a 13th chapter or 13th of anything, but the 13th chapter would be sunset provisions. What I mean by that, if you decide you want to move away from naming all the departments or the boards and commissions in the charter, you don't want to go without them. You put them in this last chapter. It's a sunset chapter. Everything remains status quo. Every department remains exactly as it is today or the day you adopt the charter. Only when the council creates the new replacement body by ordinance and the corporation council signs off that the charter provisions have been complied with, only then does that chapter go away, and then you're on your own, because then you have all the departments in the ordinances and everything operates. So you don't want to create a situation where you go without boards of commissions or departments. You want to make sure that everything has a flow and a seamless transition. The scope of the enterprise. I want to emphasize that we don't have a lot of time. That's sometimes a good thing, actually. Forces all of us to focus really on what the task will be. And we'll talk about how the scope is developed in a moment. It really will be determined starting at the next meeting of this commission with your statutory public hearing. The statutory public hearing gives the members of the public an opportunity to come and tell you what they think needs to be done in this charter revision process. So I don't know if anybody has any idea what the burning issues are, but we'll find out at the public hearing. It will be the first place where you find that out. What I'm also going to recommend is this next step. And normally we would do it in 2 different nights, but I would recommend that we try to do it in the same night unless we anticipate there's going to be a huge surge of public participation, is that you invite your local officials either that same night or at the next meeting. I'll leave that up to you to decide, to have the mayor and have leadership from the council, other members of the council come and tell you what they believe are the priorities that they have for this process as you embark on the process. And so that, again, will help you get a sense of what your workload is going to look like. At the next meeting, that's when we'll start the process of work. and start to prioritize where you give me or Kevin assignments to figure out what our steps are and what it is we need to do. One of the things that we usually do, and I usually do this with the Corp Council, I'm not sure it's going to be necessary in this case, but it might be, because it's a good opportunity for everybody to go through the charter together, is a red line exercise. I'm not sure we're going to need to red line on this charter. It's pretty clean in so many respects. I think that one of the things I would do if we didn't change anything else, I might break paragraphs up and break them down into subcategories to let the public know that this sentence means this and this sentence means that. But usually in an older city, in a big city charter with a lot of old special act provisions, we like to go through and say, this is like 19th century language that nobody understands, and let's fix it so that we understand it in the 21st century. I don't think you have a lot of that in your charter, but I'll talk to Kevin. We'll figure out what kind of exercise we should go through. Very basic things I just talked about: update language, update the format. I talked about the format and the organization of the charter. Clarify any problematic or ambiguous provisions. I assume when the mayor speaks to us, or the chair of the council speaks to us, or the Corp Council, they will let us know if there are ambiguous provisions in the charter. I'm dealing with one in Weston right now, dealing with transfers, year-end transfers, really problematic paragraph in their charter that we're trying to fix. You want to make sure that the charter is written in a way so that when a member of the public looks at it, really improves their understanding of how the government operates and what the government looks like. And then it should also be amended to reflect any changes in government structure. I don't think we're going to run into this here, but I usually have a big note here. The charter revision is not the vehicle for government reform initiatives. I think one of the problems with your last charter revision is that it led to a restructuring of the form of government. Very difficult to do, even if you were to use the full 15 months that you're entitled to use under the statute. Because when you're changing the form of government, if you're going from a Board of Selectmen and town meeting form of government to a council mayor form of government, that's a big deal. I mean, I represent some small towns, and their sensibility of who they are is kind of rolled up in having their town meeting and having their first selectman, because they've had a first selectman since 1787 in this town, and we don't want to really change that. So to change that, you don't do that in a charter revision process. You do a management study, you do an analysis, and you work it out with the voters for a year or two, sometimes more, before you do a charter. Once you come to a consensus and everybody feels comfortable with what they're doing, then you can go convene a charter commission, and the charter commission looks at how different other communities deal with it, and then you deal with formatting and structuring and all that. But it's almost impossible for a charter commission, in my view, to take on the job of socializing that kind of structural change. That may have been one of the problems in the past. You need to decide also whether you want to have a micromanaging charter or a constitution. I tend to try to persuade people that you don't want to have too much in your charter. If you go online, I'll encourage it, but if you don't do it, I'll understand. Take a look at the Stamford City Charter. It is like the Louisiana Code. It is just so heavily codified that it's impossible to understand what it is you're supposed to do. And I did the Stamford Charter a couple of years ago, and I still have nightmares from that process. But it was and it didn't pass. In fact, the legislature intervened and passed a rat piece of legislation to make certain things illegal to change in charters, because there was a big war within Stamford. But it's a very difficult charter. It's a charter I really would love to be able to unravel and create, but it's the ultimate micromanaging charter that has so many different elements of what you do that it makes it impossible to change anything. That's why you want things shifted to the council to do ordinances, the mayor and the council to create ordinances, so you can change it if the culture has changed in the last 30 years or 25 years or 10 years, 5 years for that matter. So it's a tricky assignment. Again, I'll repeat, no inherent powers, no implied powers. We have to think a lot about the Title VII and our authority. There's something else we need to think about, and that's the impact of collective bargaining agreements. So when we look at those departments, and those departments in particular, I don't think there's anything that I'm going to be proposing that will impact a collective bargaining agreement, but you have to think about it because collective bargaining agreements have provisions in them that actually trump the provisions of your charter. And I'll give you a great example of that. In Hamden, we had a shooting, a police shooting incident 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I had to appear at a meeting with about 400 people in the audience, and the Hamden Charter had the disciplinary process for the discipline of police officers. And the problem was the collective bargaining agreement had a provision for the discipline of police officers, and guess which one took control? The collective bargaining agreement. And I'm sitting there with members of the public yelling and screaming that we're not following the charter. You're a lawyer. You're supposed to tell them to follow the charter. And I point out that all of you are supporters of labor unions in the state of Connecticut, and the General Assembly has given them the authority and the cities the authority to engage in collective bargaining. And your legislative council, your city council has approved the bargaining agreement. And if you approve a bargaining agreement that has a provision that is ambiguous or counteracts a provision of the charter, the collective bargaining agreement rules. That's just the way it is. It rules. So it trumps you. And I'll tell you what we did in Hamden. We took the provisions of discipline and we reverse engineered them to correspond with what the collective bargaining agreement had. And I don't know if anybody will ever listen or ever remember that I told them this. Now that we've done this, don't change the collective bargaining agreement. The public has a right to see in their charter what the process is. And so we conceded that it had changed, but don't do it again. You really shouldn't do a disciplinary process in the collective bargaining agreement if you have one in your charter, and you should resist making those kinds of changes. I don't think we have that issue here. So let's talk about the process. You've been created. The first 2 steps have taken place. They mandated the charter revision. They created the Charter Commission, and all of you lucky folks are sitting around the horseshoe here getting ready to engage in this behavior. It's not really a partisan activity. You have people of both parties and probably unaffiliated people. I haven't looked at the identity of any of you in terms of which party you're a member of. But one of the things I strive for in communities, even places like New Haven, where we have 30 Democratic council members, alders, and no other party, no Greens, no Republicans, no working families. But they have to appoint in accordance with minority party representation. But even in a place like New Haven, I always try to teach charter commissions to have respect for the minority parties that are in their community. You never know when the tables may turn, and it's really important that everybody work together and kind of look at this as your white wig moment where you're trying to do, not that they didn't fight. These guys in the Constitutional Convention fought a lot, but let's go with the ideal that they were just demigods and they just didn't fight. They just had edicts from the Lord about where the country should go. But but I think we have to be as high-minded as we can be in the process. The work plan is formulated at public meetings following the public hearing. We really shouldn't talk tonight about anything other than the broad things I've just raised with you. So you have a time frame. We have to go through a process that will cover the rest of the month of March and take us into the month of April, full month of April, and just about all of May. But on May 29th, John F. Kennedy's birthday, I don't know why I remember that, but it's John F. Kennedy's birthday, we have to provide the report to the council. We have to provide a draft report to the council. So it's a pretty short process. I'm going to recommend when we talk the scheduling part, trying to do at least a meeting a week. If we don't need a meeting in the week, we can cancel it. But to try to get as many meetings scheduled as we can between now and May 29th, we need to do the public hearing. I'm hoping that we'll get the public hearing out of the way next week so we don't lose any more time. And I'm also going to suggest that we try to piggyback that public hearing with an opportunity for the mayor and other leaders, members of the council, to make their presentations. If that doesn't work out, we probably have to move it to the meeting after that. And then try to go through meetings at their first meeting, really come in, know what we heard at the public hearing, know what we've heard from the elected officials, and begin to prioritize the work that needs to be done, and then just work our way through the process. I hope I'll be helpful. I've done a lot of these, and I try not to impose my views. I do have views, but you have the votes, and you're entitled to operate in the best interest of your community. I don't present cookie cutter charters. People say, "What's the ideal charter?" I say, "Well, if Mednick Town had a charter, I'd tell you what Mednick Town's charter would look like, but this ain't Mednick Town. This is West Haven or New Haven or Stonington." I'm thinking of the places I'm working right now. And so I need to, as we draft, I need the guidance of everybody in this room on what the customs are, where the potholes are, where the ghosts are, and where the bodies are buried, to make sure that we write a charter or a reform charter that works for your community. Once we give it to the council, it's a draft report, we give it to the council. They have a time frame, and no one's going to be able to go through their full time frame. So as we get closer to the submission, we will sit, the chair, myself, will sit and talk about, with the chair of the council, how much time the council really will need. They have technically up to 60 days. They have to have a public hearing within 5 days after getting it from you, and then 15 days after the public hearing, they have to vote on the charter. And they can actually vote to make it a final copy, a final version, by simply accepting everything you've done. But the more likely scenario, I can't think of, maybe once or twice I've had that happen, that they usually come in with recommendations. Because what happens very often is during the process, something will come up and the commission may not have time to address it, but the council chair has somebody who approached him, and the council chair says, "I think we need to look at this issue when it comes before us," and they would then introduce that item as a recommendation for you to consider in the next phase thereafter. So what happens at the end of that process? So during that process, and we talked about this yesterday, I recommend poor Art Kelly and the vice chair. I recommend that the chair and vice chair and any other members of the body who want to be there really attend the meetings of the council. I think it's important I look at it as a mediative process. I think as you're looking at this process, I know you're independent. You could do almost anything you want, but you need to be mindful of the fact that it's the council that created you, and the council makes the final judgments on what's going to be on the ballot, including the ballot questions. So it's important not to cower and not to be totally submissive, but to be cognizant of the fact that you need to talk to the elected officials and make sure they're comfortable with what you're doing. So if we tackle a controversial issue, I'm sure that Mr. Kelly, the Chair Kelly, will certainly call the chair. We have Ron Quagliani here as as the liaison to say, "What do you think? Do you think this has any chance of flying through the council? It didn't come up. It wasn't brought up by any of the council members. What do you think? Do you think this will work? Won't work? Whatever. Should we refine it? Whatever it may be." I recommend throughout the entire process, and particularly in one that's going to be so condensed, that we maintain constant contact between the appointing authority and the body. Not discouraging you from taking independent stands, but I just want to be mindful of what the goals are and what the objectives are. So they then send the recommendations back to you. You have up to 30 days. My hope is that if you're giving them the draft report at the end of May, that somehow by the end of June or right around the 4th of July, they'll come back to you with the recommendations. That seems to be the way it's worked in most of my charters. And then they will take 30 days or less. The commission will have 30 days or less to deal with the recommendations. I don't see a huge problem here. I'll go back to Stanford. There were 132 items on the recommended review list for the Charter Commission. So consider yourselves very lucky that you don't have 132 items. A lot of communities, we're doing another charter in Stonington starting up in a few weeks, and there's about 17 items. That's a lot of items to think about. Right out of the beginning of the horse race, you've got 17 items you've got to leave before the public hearing occurs, and that becomes a management issue. So you then have up to 30 days. At that point, you only get to vote on the items that the council has given back to you. Yay or nay? Again, the very first meeting, the chair of the council and I talked about this yesterday, usually is a joint meeting of the council and the commission. And it's called the conferral meeting. That's the meeting where they sit with you and tell you these are the 5 things we want, the 20 things we want, the 3 things we want, and here's why we want them. And then you have a dialogue, go back and forth. And at that stage, I encourage the chair and the other leaders of the council to pay attention. You got Ron there, but everybody should be ready for combat to make sure that we end up with a product that will pass the charter, pass the council in the end. At the very end of the process, the council is very constricted. Again, they can't amend anything. They can't change anything. They can only vote up or down. And that's why it's important at that last phase that you have it to make sure that you understand what they're looking for. And if you want to support it, that you give them the language that will pass, because they can't change it except for technicalities, minor things, erratas, Scrivener's errors. They really can't make any changes at that point. They can only vote up and down, in whole or in part, on any of the proposals that come from the commission. They then have 15 days to do that. During that process, in the month of August, presumably, they would hopefully approve the charter, approve the question or questions, and that's really their function. The council will choose the questions. Usually, if there's a controversial matter, you separate it out from the rest of the charter, and you then have to submit those questions to the Secretary of State's office by the first week in September. And then November, you have the referendum. The referendum, there's a misconception. If you were to do a referendum that was freestanding, if we weren't going to do the referendum tied into the general election, 15% of the populace needs to come out and vote. That virtually never happens in a charter referendum. So you're better off doing what we're doing, attach it to the general election, and then if 3 people vote, 2 for and 1 against, it passes. But it's part of the general election process. So my role is to provide legal advice, to do research and backup. I'll work with the Corporation Counsel. There might be things he can do that would save the cost of my activities a little bit. I try to facilitate the deliberations and discussions and try to provide you with background materials. I told you I've done all these charters in all these places and other municipal projects, and that is it. So I'm very, very happy to be here. And grateful that West Haven has called on me, the mayor and the council have called on me to do this, and look forward to working with the chair, his family I've known for many, many years, and my other friends on the commission over the course of time. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Attorney Mednick. Yes, I will open it up to questions. One of the questions I have to start off is, can we get this done in the time frame we need?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it depends on what happens at the public hearing. I mean,
Right.
And then you're going to have to make a triage decision to deal with those items that are the priority items. I think
So
that
we have to set our meeting schedule and around how many days we've got to give the public notice of our meeting and those types of things.
Yeah, notice is what I'm going to propose is that you try to set your entire schedule, and the clerk will then post the whole schedule. So we'll have notice out, and then we would post agendas as we go through. We might even post a standard agenda and then modify it before the meeting. But I would recommend that one of the things we do tonight is kind of come up with a schedule that works. And we'll have to work with, my schedule is tied in. I'm doing Weston, finishing them up. I'm not going to worry about Stonington right now if they have to wait because they're going to start their 3rd charter in 4 years. They may have to wait a little bit because this is my priority. I promised the mayor that I would get this done and get it done in an orderly way. I don't see it as a monumental task unless this commission decides they want to start looking at a restructure. I don't see any real impediments. And if we find that even my idea of reorganizing the departments, there may be a way to do it that's a step not quite where I'd like to recommend we go, but if we start finding that we get bogged down on that, then we may have to triage and figure out how to do it. But I believe we can get this done. If we schedule one meeting a week, subject to cancellation. So if everybody's exhausted and we don't need to have a meeting every week, I think we'll get it done.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Attorney Mednick? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Even though I said I wasn't part of it. Everything you just ran through, the 30 days, the public hearing, do you have that in writing, like in a timeline that we can,
I'll just make sure this goes out.
do you want me to make a quick copy of anything for anybody here?
I was going to give it to Stacy, and she would distribute it to everybody. I'll email it to her tomorrow.
Okay, and then you're going to let Stacy know how much time in advance we have to post?
It's 24 hours. It's freedom of information. It's a 24-hour notice requirement for the posting of the meetings. But I think if we post the whole list, it's taken care of. And then it's just a function of posting your agenda.
Okay, and then one last question. I know I'm getting a little ahead of us, but
That's all right.
you said there'd be one question or there can be several questions on the ballot.
Yeah.
So you can have a number of items and then one item, or you could have 5 items, or it just depends on what the commission comes up with as to what appears on the ballot.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, what I've done in a lot of communities, there are some people. One of the big disputes we had, everything was a dispute in Stamford. I love the city, and the mayor's a wonderful person, and a lot of good people there. But my God, did they fight about everything? They wanted to do 9 questions. I've never had a charter with 9 questions. They just wanted to break everything up. I think that was an effort by some people who wanted to kill everything to just have the 9 questions out there. What voter is going to take the time to vote for 9 questions on your charter? That year was a presidential election cycle. I mean, really, it's not going to happen. So I usually recommend 1 question if you can do that. If you have, let's say we do the 4-year term. 4-year term used to be a very controversial issue. When I did it 12 years ago in Hamden, they didn't think it would pass, and they didn't even put it in. They were afraid of the 4-year term. It's in New Haven, too. 2 charters ago in the teens, we were afraid to deal with it. We didn't deal with it. In the last cycle, in both those communities, we put it in, and I recommended a separate question, but the council presidents in both those communities said, no, we're going to go up or down on it. We're going to fight for it. And we're going to pass it. And we're not going to. Both of them went through 60% of the vote. Everything was in 1 question. And what we did in those communities, we did something I call an omnibus question, because some people criticize. Oh, I didn't talk about one other thing. Thank you for asking this question, because it reminded me. Some people criticize a question. Well, New Haven had this question this way. Do you support the charter revision as adopted by the Board of Alders, recommended by the Charter Commission, adopted by the Board of Alders? Hamden, I think, it did the same way. In a lot of my communities, I say, do you support the charter? You have to ask a question that includes a definitions section, new code of ethics reform, 4-year term for mayor, 4-year term for council, and just go and list the major things. The risk you run is if somebody's really unhappy with something in the middle of that list and gets the constituencies up, you can lose. So the judgment the council needs to make at the end of this process is what are those items? What are the controversial items? But I think if you can do 1 question, it's the cleanest way to do it. But the way you educate the voters is this. I didn't talk about 2 things. I didn't talk about publication. I'd love for the state to change the laws on newspaper publication, but right now you still have to publish in the newspaper within 30 days after the approval by the council. And so it's usually a red line. Some of them are ridiculous. The last Waterbury charter I did, there were so many changes we made, you couldn't even read the red line. It was almost impossible. Would have been better off with a paragraph by paragraph analysis, but the law requires that we show all the changes. And so you have to have newspaper publication. The other thing I always recommend is that you authorize the city and town clerk to prepare an explanatory text. And especially in the modern era now, where we live with the internet, with our website, you can publish. It was originally done just for absentee ballots and for the polling place. You can now do anything you want with it. You can basically put it on your website, and all the explanatory texts I write, technically town clerk is supposed to write it, and the Corp Council has to sign off on it. It has to be a neutral document. You can't say support the 4-year term because it's a wonderful thing to do. All you can say is it includes a 4-year term for mayor. It has to be an objective standard. That document is a terrific document because that really tells the voters, even if you have a single line question, everything that's in there. And it's not, doesn't wait for the election day where it has to be posted at the polling place. You can post it on your website. You can publish it in the newspaper if you want. You can hand it out at all the bodegas in town, or and you can do anything you want with it. But it's a really good document, and it's usually short enough for people to be able to digest because it still needs to be short enough to go in with the ABs. When you send the ABs out, that document has to go out with the ABs. And so I strongly recommend to the council that when we get to the end of this process that we authorize that last step where we do the explanatory text. Did that answer your question, Mayor? Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Attorney Mednick? Hearing none, thank you, Steve, again. Okay, so this gets to the heart of the matter in setting a schedule. I guess based on Steve's recommendation, we're looking at one meeting per week. Is there anyone that has a concern about them being able to do one meeting a week? You do?
No.
No.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do all the meetings need to be in person? Is there an opportunity to Zoom in?
I believe,
Is that okay?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
What's that, Stacy?
Okay. Thank you.
So, Steve, our first meeting, we can set it for next week. How much time do you think we need?
Technically, you just need 24 hours, but I would recommend that if you come up with a meeting time, that Stacy get the notice out tomorrow. And I don't need to be at your public hearing. I'd like to be there if I can, but I was going to recommend the 25th or the 26th, the Wednesday or the Thursday. Oh, I can't do Thursday, but I don't need to be there. I have a Weston meeting on Thursday.
In fact, is there a day that's better for everybody? Wednesdays? Can everybody agree on a Wednesday?
Thursday's actually better for me.
Who said that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Lalani.
Mr.
Tuesdays
Chairman,
or Thursdays are
Yes.
best for me, but
Okay.
are you, Mr. Chairman, are you asking just for the public hearing, or are you getting recommendations from all the commissioners of what day of the week we would prefer going forward for our weekly meetings?
Yes, your second part.
The second part? Okay,
Yep.
so I would be a Thursday.
Okay. Based on Attorney Mednick's 25th or 26th, do you want to set it for the 26th, which is a Thursday, for our first meeting and public hearing? Does that work for everyone or not?
Nor
Maybe not.
nor will
Or
I.
will I? Bridget? You're fine. Thursdays are harder for you? Okay, so, all right, so if it's a Wednesday, how many can attend? 2, 3. Next week. Yeah. You're on next week. Okay. If it's Thursday, how many can attend? Is Lalani? So it looks like we can get more people on Thursday. So I would say we set it for Thursday, March 26th. Is that reasonable?
What time do you want to do it?
I would say 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Any suggestions?
This is the public,
Yes, this is our first meeting with the public hearing.
probably
Public
seven.
input.
7.
7
People
o'clock.
Well, no, I'm not dictating. I'm saying if
Yeah. No.
just people get home from work, get settled, eat, whatever,
Right.
it might be a little better.
Yep. Okay.
Staying lighter later.
Yeah, I agree. 7 o'clock. Okay, and subsequent meetings, Steve, once a week.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
So
You want to do you're aiming for Thursdays?
well,
'Cause I'll tell you the Thursdays I can't make it is the
26. So the following week, Wednesday is April 1st, Thursday is April 2nd. For the following week, how many can attend on a Wednesday? 4, 5. How many can attend on a Thursday? So looks like we'll go for Thursday, April 2nd.
My problem on April 2nd is I have the Weston charter meeting that starts at 5 o'clock. And we're getting to the end of the process, so that could be a late meeting. That's if the Corp Council's here, that would be fine.
Yeah. What about Tuesdays? Anyone who can make it on a Tuesday?
I can do the Tuesday that week.
Art, Steve. It's the April next meeting after the 1st.
Be March 31st, actually.
Tuesday is March 31st.
If we're going to discuss, could everybody turn
Yeah.
their mics on if they're talking? Thank you.
So I just want to ask, are we not looking to try to do the same day of the week, or it's going to fluctuate, do we think?
Well, that's why I'm
That-
trying to get a handle on who can
What
attend
the better
when.
day is?
Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, I'd like to set it for the same day every week, but I don't think that's going to work. How many people said Tuesday they're available?
I can do
March
Tuesday.
31st. Steve, you're not available? Okay. So, either Tuesday, March 31st or Thursday, April 2nd. How many did we say on Thursday? 1, 2, 3. That looks like most of us. So why don't we go with Thursday then, the 2nd?
Same time?
Same time, 7 o'clock. The following week,
So that's April 2nd?
that's April 2nd. So we'll ask that Corp Council be here
Yeah.
since you cannot.
Yeah, I'll be able to come late, but I can't be there for that meeting.
Do we want to try and set the same day every week or just go week by week?
Well, we try it, see if it works out.
Okay. So
I can be there for the 9th, Thursday the 9th.
Thursday the 9th. How many people can make Thursday the 9th? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll be out of town. Lilani. Okay, so we'll set Thursday the 9th. 7 p.m.
I can join via.
You can join, yes. Okay. And the April 16th, Thursday the 16th, same thing.
Yeah, I can't be there. It's the public hearing for Weston. That's my last conflict night. So.
Okay. Again, we'll ask for Corp Council to be here. And if we have any questions, we'll email them to you.
Yeah. Now, it's possible they don't need me at their public hearing, so I'll figure that out. But those are my only 2 conflict nights.
Okay. So we'll schedule Thursday, the 23rd of April. And does that work good?
These are all going to be 7 p.m.?
Yes. And the 30th is my wife's birthday, so I know I can't be there. Do we want to wait and see how these April meetings go as to
I think that's
how
a
we
great idea.
scheduled May?
Yeah, I think that's a good
'Cause-
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 weeks in April.
Yep. Okay, very good. All right, are there any other questions for anyone about the process? Attorney Mednick, I just want to state that our role actually is to make recommendations to the council, and they decide on the items that are going to be put on the ballot.
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Does there need to be a quorum at the meeting?
Yes.
Yes,
You can't do business without a quorum.
correct. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or issues? Yes,
Just
Lisa.
have a quick question. Are
Yep.
we inviting this city council to the
Yes.
first public hearing?
We
Yes.
will invite the city council to the first public hearing. Anyone else that we should invite
The mayor.
besides the mayor? She's invited. all.
Does the mayor think there's any department heads or anybody that should be here to discuss any things that they might concern? Yeah.
They've been sending me recommendations, like their titles that are archaic or outdated, or there's departments, as you said, that don't exist anymore. So they don't have to come, but they're welcome to come. I could, I'll send an email distribution out to all the department heads, inviting them.
For the first meeting where we
Yeah.
have public input. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, no other issues, and we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you for everybody for coming. Motion to adjourn, second? Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
I have no idea who's seconding.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bridget, yeah. Yeah,
She made the motion. Who seconded
she
it?
made the motion, and Tony